An artist living in Rhode Island had just lost his beloved apartment. The place had been his home and sanctuary of creativity for years, but now it was being turned into a parking lot by a big development company, and he had to find a new option fast. He knew just where to go. The company that displaced him had also built a giant mall nearby, and he was going to fight back against the company by living in that mall. Buried inside the structure was a secret that only he knew, a room that had been created by mistake, a leftover space formed by the walls of planned stores and rooms. He discreetly started cleaning it out, filling it with furniture, and making it into a livable apartment. For 4 years, he used the room without anybody noticing and without paying rent. How did he get away with it for so long? 10 years earlier, in 1999, Michael Townsend had a daily running route that took him right past the space where Providence Place, a shopping mall, was being constructed. This would be the largest shopping mall in Rhode Island, 1.4 million square feet in downtown Providence, where a university used to be. Michael got to see the construction progress every day. As he would run past the site, he would notice specific rooms and spaces being built from the ground up. He could see what looked like it would be for parking, what would be for storage, and what might become stores. It was fun to have an idea of the mall layout before the public. But as he ran every day and made up a mental map of the mall, there was one room he spotted that didn't make any sense. It wasn't an intentional room, but was a hidden space buried in the architecture, surrounded by walls of the planned-out stores and storage spaces. When Michael ran by Providence Place, he would wonder about this leftover room, an empty bonus space accidentally made from the other pieces of the mall. What would they do with it? By the time the mall was finished, Michael had put the question of the room out of his mind. Providence Place was a huge success, and developers decided to capitalize on the momentum. 4 years after opening the mall, they were looking for a new space around the area to develop. This time, they went even closer to Michael, choosing to build in the historic Mill District where Michael lived and worked with other artists, including his wife, Adriana. He and Adriana and 6 of their friends, who were part of an artist collective called Trummerkind. Their group of friends lived and created in an old industrial building called Fort Thunder. The developers planned to tear down all the old mill buildings and make a supermarket car park. Fort Thunder was knocked down and cleared away by cranes and bulldozers. In Michael's mind, this had all begun with that first mall, the one he had run past every day. The group of artists decided to do a stunt as a form of protest, something related to the mall that symbolized resistance to them losing their homes and spaces. Adriana had a lifelong interest in malls. She used to be a shopaholic who adored mall shopping. Even after curbing the habit, she was still interested in the concept and wrote academically about shopping malls as modern-day colonies. At the time the group was cooking up a plan, it was around the holiday season, so there were radio ads playing for Providence Place Mall. A cheerful woman gushed about how wonderful life would be if you could live in a mall, with everything you need to thrive right next to you. The group decided to live in the mall for 7 days as their stunt, with the rule being they could not leave for that duration. They would assert that mall spaces belonged as much to them as developers. This discussion jogged Michael's memory. He thought about that old leftover room in the mall that he used to see on his runs, and what might have become of it. He remembered that it had been connected to a small crevice, a gap in the building's structure, which eventually led outside. The crevice had definitely been covered, Michael figured, but he went to check it out anyway. Incredibly, it was still there, small and sort of hidden, but there. Michael and Adriana turned sideways to squeeze inside. It was a narrow maze, and in places gaps in the floor that would send you plummeting down if you didn't notice them. The couple navigated a series of chambers until they finally found it. A wide, tall abandoned room made from the walls of other surrounding rooms, above an unused storage room in the parking garage, 750 square feet that no one else knew about. It was filled with leftover construction materials, cables, and debris. They discovered there were multiple entry points like the one they came through, including from within the mall itself. If you knew where you were going, you could even enter the room from inside Macy's. The group decided to make a new home for themselves with this room. If developers could do whatever they want with underdeveloped space, why couldn't they? The developers behind Providence Place had taken away their living spaces, and now they were fighting back and claiming a new space from the mall. Though they still wanted to stay for a full week, the new plan was just to live at the mall, period, with no end date in mind. The 8 artists had to shimmy through a passage only 2 feet wide and covered with grime. They disguised themselves as mall shoppers in nice outfits sporting big backpacks and Nordstrom bags. First, they had to remove stuff out and clean the hidden room. They stuffed their bags with construction materials and garbage and carried it out. Then, things had to be brought into the space. Big water jugs for cleaning and drinking, clamp lights, and extension cords they plugged into their internal power system. In exchange for using the power, they put $20 into an envelope that they slipped under the mall manager's door. To cover the other entry points, they brought in cinder blocks and constructed a wall to block people from stumbling onto their secret. They even got a door that looked exactly like the doors the mall used, so if anyone came across it, they would just think that it was part of the original design. None of their renovation work was done in secret at nighttime. They worked in the open, fitting into the ebb and flow of the mall goers. When it was time to furnish the space, they just carried in their furniture and decorations, walking through the mall looking like customers who had just made a purchase. The secret home was coming together. There was a 4-piece sectional couch, a table with a TV and PlayStation, a china cabinet, matching silverware and glassware for 8 people, a 6-foot potted plant, a love seat, a decoration throw rug, and a makeshift kitchen. After the original 1-week stunt, Michael, Adriana, and their friends would come and go as they pleased, sometimes staying in the apartment for weeks at a time. There was no running water, so they had to use the mall bathrooms. When the artists weren't in the space watching TV or playing video games, they were free to wander the mall, which they did often as it almost never closed since there was a late-night movie theater. The group felt that they had subverted the mall's commercial purpose. Providence Place Mall promised an escape from the burdens of everyday life, but that came with a price tag. Trummerkind found a way to capture that promise without being consumers. Rhode Island's largest mall had 4 floors, 170 shops, 8 restaurants and entertainment venues, and 1 secret apartment. Years passed with the group blissfully living this way, and it seemed like the dream could go on forever. Then, one day, 4 years after making the apartment, the group found their doors kicked in and some things stolen. But it was a strange burglary. Their art, a photo album, and PlayStation were gone, but the expensive TV and silverware and items of more value were untouched. Still, the incident put Michael and his friends on high alert. They changed their routine to only staying at night when there were fewer people and the chances of being caught were low. They doubled down on their secrecy, swearing to tell no one about the space. Many of Michael's closest friends never saw the apartment at all. One day, Michael's friend and fellow artist Jaffa was visiting from Hong Kong. He was driving her to the bus station on her way out of town when they were passing Providence Place, and he couldn't resist showing her the apartment. Just a quick look, he thought. That couldn't hurt, right? Jaffa was amazed at what the friends had created in the middle of the mall. It felt like a real home. Michael showed her the door, the wall, all the furniture, decorations, and their work. Then, they heard walkie-talkies on the other side of the door. Mall security guards burst into the space, and Michael yelled the only thing that came to mind. Surprise! The guards were the ones who had discovered the space earlier, but instead of removing the belongings and blocking the room off, they wanted to figure out who the culprits were. They had taken the photo album and personal belongings to try to find the suspect, and ever since, they had been staking out the spot, waiting for a slip-up, just like this. Michael had broken the secrecy rule, and he had to pay the price. It was all over. Michael and Jaffa were interrogated by the police. She was eventually free to go, but he was in deep trouble. He was charged with breaking and entering and trespassing, and had to go through a court trial. As the prosecutor described the apartment, listing the furniture and decorations, the judge looked around, confused at what was being outlined. He had a discussion with his advisors and then announced something incredible. "This is not a criminal act. We're not exactly sure what it was, but this is not a crime." It was a miracle for Michael. 4 years of secretly living in an apartment within the walls of the mall, rent-free, and he scraped by with hardly any consequences. He did receive a misdemeanor for trespassing, but was released on probation. The worst punishment, in Michael's mind, came from the mall authorities. They issued him an official ban for life. He had to sign a map of Providence Place that had a big red outline around the whole area, which stated that he couldn't cross the line. This was a real bummer for him. Another unexpected outcome was the media interest and public attention the case got. Multiple outlets wrote about the apartment, and Michael did interviews and went on podcasts. He and his group of friends created a blog, also called Tremorkind, documenting their experience. They scanned their sketchbook pages, uploaded handmade maps of the mall's undefined spaces, and posted videos and pictures of their mall apartment. They even made a joking housing advertisement website of the apartment outlining the advantages of living in the mall. Over 10 years later, Michael still lived close to Providence Place, but obeying the ban diligently. He no longer runs by it and never goes inside. Even if he wanted to go downtown, the path that he would bike through went through the middle of the mall area, so he would always bike around it. He sometimes has to pay someone to run errands for him if they require the mall. Adriana and Michael, who are no longer married, have given talks to law school audiences and art students, and even recreated the mall apartment at a local gallery. Michael has also created another hidden project in a tunnel, an underground installation of belongings from the first 30 years of his life. The water-draining tunnel can be reached through a manhole cover and became an urban exploration destination. But the mall apartment has a special place in Michael's heart. It was a true oasis from life for him. He still wishes he could go back. Michael wasn't the only person who made a home in a building that was designed for commercial purposes. Mehran Karimi Nasseri was an Iranian refugee who lived in Terminal 1 of Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport from 1988 to 2006. He was traveling from France to the UK when his papers, issued from Belgium, were allegedly stolen. In London, he couldn't provide a passport and was sent back to France. Unable to prove his refugee status or identity, he was detained in a waiting area. Mehran lived in the airport for the next 18 years. Nasseri journaled, listened to the radio, smoked, studied economics, and ate using meal tickets from strangers or McDonald's meals they bought for him. He could often be found sitting at a red bench in a reflective trance, looking like he was meditating. A human rights lawyer took on this case, and there were offers of residency from France and Belgium, but Alfred wanted to enter his original destination, the UK, and he refused to sign papers because they classified him as Iranian instead of British. He also wanted them to list his preferred name, Sir Alfred Mehran, instead of his legal name. His family believes that living in Terminal 1 was the life that Alfred wanted. This curious story actually inspired the Steven Spielberg film, The Terminal. In 2006, after almost 2 decades of life in a Paris airport, Alfred was hospitalized and his sitting place was removed. He went on to live at a shelter in Paris, but apparently had returned to living in the airport sometime in 2022, where he sadly passed away from a heart attack in November. It would be nice to live without having to pay rent or a mortgage, but I'm sure we all prefer to have access to a bathroom, a proper kitchen, and not have to sneak in and out of our own home.